Coworker tried to get me fired over breast implants, so I pulled a reverse card. I had an awful manager that caused me to have breakdowns multiple times a week, and I'm talking breaking into tears and sobbing in my manager's office 3 times a week. Bad. She tried writing me up, and I refused to sign it. Went back to my desk and printed every email exchange we had over the previous 8 months, about 200 emails, separated them into 3 stacks that were about even in size. Emails where she told me I was amazing and she couldn't do her job without me. Emails where she went off on me. Emails where I asked a relevant question or advised them of an upcoming problem and never received a reply. HR met with me to go over the performance plan and I refused to sign it, and I brought the stack of papers. Casually dropped hostile work information into the conversation. Surprise! I didn't have to sign the performance plan. Also, from then on, my manager wasn't allowed to speak to me directly. Everything had to go through my supervisor, who was a sweetheart and literally looked uncomfortable anytime she sat in meetings between manager and me. 6 weeks later, the manager got fired. That was a great outcome. In the present day, I'm 28 years old and working in an office. I'm doing a lot better than I was. My co-worker Jill found out I had a boob job, but not about the cancer thing. When myself and my friends from years before the mastectomy were planning a holiday, and she made a joke about me going on the plane with my implants, and Jill overheard. By the end of the day, the entire office knew I had a boob job, but not why, and half a dozen people confirmed Jill had told them. Over the next few months, Jill had made many jokes and comments about my chest to co-workers when I was in earshot, at one point saying I had more plastic than Barbie, and called me fake in 2 ways. I didn't hear this one myself, but a friend in the office told me that Jill had at one point referred to me as a sack of silicone. What her problem was exactly, but at one point she mentioned the NHS, so I'm assuming Jill thought that I'd say that my tit's done for free on taxpayers' money. But I've gotten a mastectomy on NHS, I've gone private therapy and implants. I asked her to stop more than once, but unfortunately the places I'd talk to her were places like the lift and a women's bathroom where there weren't any cameras, and Jill just kept making comments no matter how often I asked her not to. I wouldn't say it was every single day, but I heard at least 3 comments per week for 3 months. I hit my breaking point when me, Jill and a few other co-workers were having lunch. I referred to something as being shallow and Jill said, "You know about being shallow?" While gesturing to my chest, I snapped. I said, "Do you know why I have these?" A few years ago, the doctors found potentially cancerous cells in my breast tissue. I was advised to get a mastectomy and was left in huge, ugly scars on my chest. I went to see a therapist who sent me to a cosmetic surgeon who advised me to get implants to hide the scars, and so I could look at myself in the mirror without crying. So maybe next time you want to judge someone for having cosmetic surgery, you should ask them why they had it first. And feeling like the mic drop moment, I picked up my food and left. For the rest of the day, I had about a third of my office come up to me and offer support, and then the rest tell me that Jill was joking around and I was being a bitch. I replied Jill was being a bitch long before I was. I then got an email from HR saying they wanted to talk to me on the following day, and when I called for clarification, they mentioned a hostile work environment. Note, this is apparently an American term that holds a little weight in England, but it's what was said over the phone. I knew that person who signed off the email and I'd spoken to. Her name was Debbie, and she was Jill's friend in HR, so I was fairly confident on who had reported me. I realised that if this was already being sent to HR, I needed as much ammunition as possible, so I went about collecting my information. As Debbie had dealt with me so far, it was safe to assume she would be the person reviewing the complaint with me, and if that was true, I was effed. However, I vaguely remembered a section on the complaints that there was a contract where I first signed with the company. I flicked through the contract and there was a party and complaints section that said I was contractually allowed to request a change over of reviewer if it felt my allocated reviewer was biased. It was called an impartial overseer. I photocopied that page and highlighted that part. Then I messaged the people who had offered their support over Facebook and said basically, HR have asked to see me. Do any of you remember Jill insulting me to your face and are willing to write and sign something saying that you heard and when? Not everyone was willing to help, as Jill is somewhat feared in the office due to her befriending HR and management, but about 20 people were willing to help me. I guess roughly when I'd asked Jill to stop previously, the 4 asks over the last few months sometimes were easy to guess. That happened on my break or when I first arrived at work. And I wrote them all down, along with a rough time or when the lunchroom confrontation happened, and a list of names who was there for the lunchroom confrontation. I got to work slightly early the next morning. I went round everyone who had messaged me, and most of them managed to give me a printed and signed letter. This isn't exact words, as there's 16 letters to sum up here, but the gist was, my name is, their name, I work with Jill, last name, and OP, on date, time, approximate. I spoke with Jill, her last name, during which she referred to OP. I felt this was inappropriate as I directly related OP's appearance and willing to go on record further to establish that Jill's last name had been discussing OP in the workplace in the same manner for 3 months now, causing me discomfort and creating what I feel a hostile work environment signed. I wound up with about 16 letters, all from different people, and one of them was in the lunchroom for my conversation with Jill. Some even had ball-pointed lists of everything Jill had said to them about me or the other people. As it turns out, Jill has issues with lots of people's appearance. She apparently made comments about one coworker's weight and something anti-Semitic about a different coworker's nose, and all which were putting these letters. There are about 45 people in the office, so while 16 wasn't a majority, it's still a decent amount. The letters weren't hugely long, most were only a paragraph, but they had all the necessary information. I was asked to come to HR at 10 AM. I took the letters from co-workers, the photocopies of the page in my contract, and my dates and times in a little folder with me. I got there and Debbie was overseeing the interview. She got up from her desk, ready to lead me into another room. I immediately turned to the HR worker that was currently there and said, "So is my meeting with you then?" Debbie said, "No, you're with me." Oh, lots of catchiness. I replied that this would not sit well with me, as my contract states that I have a right to an impartial overseer. And as I said this, I took the contract page out of my folder. Debbie read it. I wouldn't let her take the paper when there was a shredder so close by, and said she could be impartial. I replied that I really didn't mean to be a pain, but I had on a good authority that the person on the other end of this complaint is her friend, and my contract does say I'm allowed an impartial overseer. Debbie stomped off to get supervisor. Supervisor asked how I know she can't be impartial and tell him that I have it on a good authority that Jill, who was on the other end of this complaint, is a close friend of Debbie. He asked Debbie if this was true, to which she only replied, "I can be impartial." Supervisor took a deep breath. asked the other HR rep to come with him, and the four of us all went to review the complaint. I thanked them for being so accommodating. I was worried I'd annoyed them. Debbie took out the complaint, and all three of them just went through it with me. Debbie looked homicidal the whole time the interview was happening, as she had clearly anticipated firing me, or at least recommending me being fired. The interview went something like this. It took like half an hour, and they kept asking me the same questions but phrased different ways, so it really drastically condensed version. You said outside that you think Jill's last name reported you. Why's that? Jill has had an issue with me for about 3 months now. Why didn't you come to us when you realised Jill had an issue? I had no issue with her. What issues does Jill have with you? 4 years ago, a specialist identified potentially cancer cells in my breast tissue. I had surgery to remove my breast tissue, thereby removing the cells and the risk. After the surgery, I was left with these large scars on my chest. I went to a therapist for low self-esteem and depression. The therapist suggested a plastic surgeon who had suggested breast implants to cover my scars. All of this is in my medical history, which you have a copy of in my file and my full permission to review. Jill found out about my breast implants but didn't know about the cancer. Jill had a problem with my breast implants and decided to communicate this problem to our co-workers.